John F. Kennedy once stunned a group of exhausted Navy shipmates by hauling a critically injured crewman through dark Pacific waters. Swimming for hours with the man's life vest strap clenched in his teeth, he'd only gone out that night expecting a routine patrol, but the sudden collision that split his PT boat in half triggered an almost superhuman determination. Few on the island knew who he was, and even fewer guessed that he came from one of America's most influential families. Yet for those who truly understood Jack, as he was called, this kind of grit wasn't surprising at all. He was often unpredictable in his problem-solving, capable of grand gestures and bold decisions that shaped his reputation as a figure both charismatic and deeply complex. His story unfolds at the intersection of political ambition, personal charm, and profound vulnerability, painting the picture of a man who tried relentlessly to shape America's future, even as he battled lifelong health issues and navigated a shifting global stage. In many ways, the world defined him by his family name. But Jack's ability to inspire, unite, and lead under enormous pressure remains a testament to how he carved his own path, one that still captivates hearts decades after his tragic end. John was born on May 29, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts. He was the second child of Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., a wealthy businessman who would later become a key influencer in American politics, and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, the daughter of Boston's beloved mayor, John Francis "Honey" Fitzgerald. The Kennedys were Irish Catholic, a group that had historically faced discrimination in New England. However, with Joe's knack for finance and Rose's social polish, they ascended into Boston's elite circles. Young Jack, as he was called, grew up in a home that was both competitive and supportive. His parents expected excellence from all their children, a theme that would echo throughout Jack's life. From the start, Jack was overshadowed by his older brother, Joseph Jr., who was considered the golden boy destined for greatness. Yet Jack displayed his own charm and intelligence in subtle ways. He was inquisitive, always reading, though he preferred histories and biographies over the standard textbooks. He was also notably mischievous, pulling pranks on siblings and staff alike, a sign of his sense of humor that endured into adulthood. But behind the fun-loving persona was a boy who struggled with health issues. Throughout his childhood, Jack suffered from illnesses including scarlet fever, severe stomach problems, and what was later identified as Addison's disease. His ailments forced him to spend stretches of time in bed, reading about world events and imagining the possibilities that lay beyond his bedroom window. When Joe Sr. became the first chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and later U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, the Kennedy family's ambitions took on a broader stage. Jack spent a portion of his teen years in London, observing Europe on the eve of World War II. He attended prep schools, like Choate in Connecticut, where he earned good grades but was not necessarily a standout student. Teachers noted he was bright but sometimes appeared more interested in socializing and sports. However, even then, he showed sparks of leadership and a knack for persuasive writing and speech. After graduating from Choate, Jack enrolled at Princeton but had to withdraw due to his ongoing health concerns. He transferred to Harvard University, where he studied government and international relations. Harvard also exposed him to a network of future political, financial, and social leaders. His senior thesis, later published as the book Why England Slept, analyzed why Britain was unprepared for war against Germany. This early dabbling in foreign policy showcased his growing interest in global affairs, an interest nurtured by dinner-table debates in the Kennedy household, where Joe Sr. often tested his children's knowledge of current events. When the United States entered World War II, Jack was determined to serve despite his medical issues. His father's influence smoothed the way for him to join the Navy, leading to that fateful mission in the South Pacific with Patrol Torpedo Boat 109. The story of PT 109 became legendary. The boat was sliced in half by a Japanese destroyer, and Jack's leadership in saving his crew turned him into something of a war hero. The incident left him with lingering back pain, but it also marked him as a man of action in the eyes of the public. Upon returning home, he received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for his bravery. Meanwhile, tragedy struck the family. In 1944, Joe Jr. died on a mission when his plane exploded over the English Channel. Suddenly, the mantle of familial expectation shifted to Jack. Though he had always been overshadowed, the family's hopes and dreams were now pinned to him. After a brief stint as a reporter covering the United Nations Conference in San Francisco, Jack decided to run for political office. He campaigned for Massachusetts' 11th congressional district seat in 1946, crafting a message that blended his war hero status with promises of a fresh perspective. Young, handsome, and backed by the formidable Kennedy machine, Jack won easily. Over the next few years, Jack moved up the political ladder. After serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives, he ran for the U.S. Senate in 1952, challenging incumbent Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., a scion of a prominent Massachusetts family. It was a tight race, but Jack's personal charisma and the Kennedys' campaign prowess led him to victory. In 1953, around the same time he was sworn into the Senate, he married Jacqueline Lee Bouvier, a stylish young woman from a well-connected family. Jackie, fluent in French and possessing an innate sense of fashion and art, would become a cultural icon, helping to define an era. Yet behind the enchanting public image was a marriage tested by Jack's frequent absences and rumored infidelities. Jackie would later admit she often felt isolated, though she also recognized her husband's unwavering passion for public service. By the mid-1950s, Jack was seen as a rising star in the Democratic Party, though some critics believed his youth and health problems would hinder any national aspirations. Another challenge emerged in 1954 when he underwent a risky spinal surgery. He nearly died from complications, recovering for months, and reportedly receiving the Catholic last rites more than once. During his convalescence, he wrote Profiles in Courage, a collection of stories about senators who had risked their careers for their personal convictions. The book became a bestseller and earned a Pulitzer Prize in 1957, though there has been debate over how much of it was ghostwritten by his speechwriter, Ted Sorensen. Nevertheless, the recognition cemented Jack's reputation as a thoughtful politician with a keen sense of history. With the 1960 presidential election looming, Jack saw his moment. His father, Joe Sr., pulled strings behind the scenes, securing endorsements and media support. Jack faced off against Vice President Richard Nixon, a figure known for his anti-communist stances and political savvy. One of the turning points was the series of televised debates, an innovation that brought a Hollywood-like spotlight to presidential politics. Jack, youthful and confident before the camera, contrasted sharply with Nixon, who appeared pale and visibly sweating under the lights. The debates helped tip the scales, and in November 1960, John F. Kennedy narrowly defeated Nixon, becoming the youngest elected president in U.S. history at age 43. He was also the first Catholic to hold the office, no small matter in a country that had historically harbored suspicion toward Catholics. His inauguration on January 20th, 1961, was a moment of vibrant optimism. Americans listened to his speech in which he proclaimed, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." A whole generation felt inspired by the idea of a new frontier in politics, technology, and social progress. This surge of enthusiasm led to comparisons with Camelot, suggesting that the Kennedy White House was a modern-day court of noble ideals. Jackie's elegance and Jack's dynamic presence only reinforced this imagery. Yet beneath the surface, global tension simmered. The Cold War was at its height, with the Soviet Union testing the new administration's resolve. In April 1961, just a few months into his presidency, Jack faced his first major crisis, the Bay of Pigs invasion. This was a failed U.S.-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist regime in Cuba, planned under President Eisenhower but carried out under Jack's watch. It ended in disaster. Many within the CIA and the Pentagon had assumed that Jack, new and relatively inexperienced, would rubber stamp the operation. However, when things went wrong, he refused to escalate with direct U.S. military intervention. The fiasco humiliated the administration, but it also showed Jack's willingness to accept responsibility publicly. He famously remarked that victory has 100 fathers, and defeat is an orphan. Politically, it bruised him, but it taught him valuable lessons about the perils of listening too much to hawkish advisors. Another defining event of Jack's presidency was the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, arguably the closest the world came to nuclear war. The discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba set off a tense 13-day standoff. Military advisors pressed Jack to launch airstrikes or even a full invasion. But haunted by the Bay of Pigs debacle and the knowledge that nuclear war could destroy civilization, Jack opted for a naval blockade and intense negotiations with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. The tension was palpable. Families across the United States and Europe braced for atomic conflict. In the end, Khrushchev backed down, agreeing to remove the missiles in return for a U.S. pledge not to invade Cuba and a secret deal to remove American missiles from Turkey. The crisis cemented Jack's image as a steady-handed leader under extreme pressure, though it left behind deep scars in U.S.-Soviet relations. On the domestic front, Jack pushed for civil rights legislation, though his commitment was sometimes criticized as cautious. He had campaigned promising to address racial injustice, but in office, he faced Southern Democrats who threatened to block his entire agenda if he moved too fast. Nonetheless, he made symbolic gestures, inviting African American leaders to the White House, publicly supporting James Meredith's integration at the University of Mississippi, and addressing the nation in a landmark speech on civil rights in June 1963. In that speech, he declared civil rights a moral issue, signaling that the federal government would step up its role in protecting African Americans' rights. The cultural climate of the early 1960s was shifting. The post-war boom, the rise of television, and the global spread of American culture made the White House more visible than ever. Celebrities like Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe hovered around the Kennedys, and media interest in Jackie's style gave a glamorous sheen to the administration. Yet rumors and whispers also circulated about Jack's personal life. He had a known admiration for beautiful women, and some accounts suggest extramarital affairs, including alleged connections to Monroe. While the press of the time rarely published details of a president's private life, the gossip circulated in elite circles and occasionally found its way into hushed columns. Jack's close aides worked tirelessly to keep scandalous stories at bay, reflecting a time when the presidency was still shielded by a more discreet media culture. Despite these complexities, Jack's popularity remained high. He brought an air of vitality to the White House that resonated with the public, especially younger voters. He championed the space race, setting the ambitious goal of putting a man on the moon before the decade's end. That vision inspired a nation, galvanizing NASA's efforts and giving rise to the Mercury and Gemini missions, stepping stones that would lead to the Apollo program. For many Americans, the quest for space exploration symbolized national pride and scientific progress, an uplifting antidote to Cold War fears. Yet behind the scenes, Jack's health issues persisted. He wore a back brace for chronic pain, took various medications, and faced Addison's disease throughout his presidency. Only a small circle knew the extent of his medical challenges. He masked his discomfort with a charismatic smile and carefully choreographed public appearances. Aides recall him emerging from rides on Air Force One, sometimes looking pale and exhausted, only to straighten up and wave cheerfully to a waiting crowd. This resilience contributed to his mythic status, but it also meant he was in a constant battle to maintain his physical well-being. One of Jack's final legislative efforts involved an anti-poverty program and sweeping civil rights reform. He was crafting a broad vision for a second term, intending to push Congress harder for social changes. But destiny intervened. On November 22, 1963, while on a political trip to Texas, President Kennedy and his wife rode in an open-top limousine through downtown Dallas. Shots rang out. He was fatally wounded, slumping into Jackie's arms. The motorcade sped to Parkland Hospital, but doctors could not save him. He was pronounced dead less than an hour after the shooting. News of the assassination reverberated worldwide. Many people recall exactly where they were when they heard the breaking news bulletins. The sense of disbelief and shock was palpable. Millions tuned into their televisions, watching as Walter Cronkite removed his glasses to announce Kennedy's death. Spontaneous vigils and church services sprang up. In the days that followed, Jackie led the funeral procession, standing with quiet dignity in a black veil, their 2 children by her side. The images of John Jr. saluting his father's coffin seared into the nation's collective memory. The shock extended beyond America. World leaders recognized the tragedy as a pivotal moment in the Cold War era. The alleged assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was arrested the same day but was himself killed 2 days later by nightclub owner Jack Ruby, fueling countless conspiracy theories about the shooting. The Warren Commission eventually concluded that Oswald had acted alone, though skeptics persist to this day. For many older Americans, the events of those November days felt like the loss of innocence, a time when the country believed wholeheartedly in progress and unity, only to be confronted with sudden violence. The sense of heartbreak lingered, shaping the political and cultural mood for years. In the aftermath, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president and steered many of JFK's programs through Congress, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Johnson's Great Society expanded on themes Jack had begun to articulate, yet Jack's legacy remained distinct. Even now, commentators debate how effective he would have been in a second term. Some argue that his moderate approach to civil rights might have eventually clashed with the grassroots activism of that era. Others believe his deft touch with diplomacy might have led to détente with the Soviet Union, averting some of the tensions that flared later. We will never know, because his life and presidency were frozen in time by that single gunshot in Dallas. In the years following his death, the Kennedy family maintained its prominence in American public life. Bobby Kennedy, John's younger brother, took up the mantle of progressive politics, only to be assassinated in 1968. Teddy Kennedy, the youngest brother, served decades in the U.S. Senate. Jackie remarried, seeking a semblance of normalcy for her and her children, though she remained a subject of public fascination until her own passing in 1994. The Kennedy name continued to inspire hopes for a new generation of leaders, but it also carried a sense of tragic destiny, often referred to as the Kennedy curse. Hollywood paid tribute to Jack's memory in numerous ways. Documentaries explored his life, dramatizing events like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and fictional works occasionally imagined what might have happened if he had lived. For many Americans, the Camelot image lingered. Jack's presidency was likened to a brief, shining moment of brilliance. Indeed, Jackie herself invoked the Camelot analogy in an interview with Theodore White shortly after Jack's death, referencing the Broadway musical about King Arthur. It was her way of preserving the memory of a special time, even if the reality was more complicated. Today, historians continue to assess the nuances of JFK's achievements and shortcomings. Some highlight his cautious approach to civil rights, the near catastrophe of the Bay of Pigs, and the buildup of U.S. forces in Vietnam. Others point to his adept handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, his push for space exploration, and his ability to inspire a generation to believe in public service. His legacy remains neither purely heroic nor entirely flawed. That's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, drop us a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss our new content. Thanks for watching.